This is a night we want to make sure to start on time because there's so many stories to tell. So I'm going to keep my part short. I'm Ginny Peterson. I'm from the Washburn Heritage Association, and our organization, along with the Washburn, it's called the Washburn Area Museum right now, and the two of us work together to put on the Tony Woiak Festivals. This is our 14th year, doing 4 festival nights in the winter and 4 in the summer. And so that we thought when we started that we'd run out of stories to tell, but it hasn't happened yet. So, although sometimes we get a repeat, and the speaker tonight actually spoke at one of the very first Tony Woiaks a long time ago, 14 years ago, and she told me the story that it was a wintertime presentation, and there was kind of a bad weather situation that night, and it was, I don't know if it was planned to be, you were in the 3rd floor of the Cultural Center.
We were supposed to be in Stage North, and we had to move up to the 3rd floor.
I knew there was some sort of a last-minute shift, and there weren't many people that came to hear Kathy that night. And so she's built on that program that she had prepared for 14 years ago. And tonight she's actually got some more help from other people that know a lot about that airfield. And she's going to be introducing them later. So there's just some nuts and bolts here. First of all, as I said, we've been doing this for 14 years. And now we have, we didn't start videotaping until about the 3rd or 4th year. But now we have all the programs that we've done between that time and now within the last just season, because it takes us a while to get them recorded and on our website. But there are over 60 of them, and they're listed on the back of this piece of paper, which you can pick up on your way out. You can view any of them anytime you want on our webpage on YouTube. So, I encourage you to go through the list and find some that you might want to see. Also, let's see, what else do I want to say? I guess that's basically it, except some nuts and bolts are, we recently, in the last couple seasons, we bought all new sound and video equipment. And it's, we've got a lot of, what you can't see if you're sitting further back is there are a lot of wires running back and forth behind me and in front of me. And so what we do is we set up these orange cones just to remind people that it's probably not a good idea to step into this zone. And people just have an inclination after the program is ending to rush forward because you've got something you want to share with the speaker. But we really want to say, please don't do that for our own safety and for the equipment's safety, I guess. So Kathy, when she's done with the program that she's showing you, she's going to be taking off her lavalier, her speaker, and she will move to the back of the room, along with any of the friends that she has that are here to help tell the story tonight. So they'll be happy to hear your stories if you have some to share, or also to answer questions if you've got questions. And we may even have a little time during the program to have some questions when the presentation is at the end, before we move to the back. But I just wanted to give you a heads up about that. Thank you all so much for being here. What makes the Tony Woiak's season so wonderful are the speakers, of course, and the topic, of course, but also the audience and your warmth and your engagement and your just loyalty to keep coming back is what makes it very, very special. Kathy Peterson is our speaker tonight, and Kathy is a 1967 graduate of Washburn High School, and once she graduated from high school, she moved away, but she always comes back several times a year, and so if you've seen her little red car, then you know Kathy's in town again, and so I'll let her say a little bit more about her relationship to the community, but what I know for sure is there is nobody that is more proud to be from Washburn than Kathy Peterson. So please welcome her to the podium.
Thank you.
my friends say to me, why do you always go up north? You're up there so much. And I tell them, well, my body may live in Middleton, Wisconsin, but my heart is in Washburn. Okay, so my maiden name was Peterson. And if you notice on the information that came out, there's also a Holt attached on that. That's my married name. But when I hit Thompson's Creek, I dropped the married name. And you notice I say Thompson's Creek? Yeah, you can always tell if somebody's not from Washburn because then they say creek, right? And so we all say Thompson's Creek. Okay, so like Jimmy said, yeah, how are we doing sound-wise?
Well, we're just going to tune you down a little bit.
Turn it down? Okay. I've never used one of these lavaliers before. So I, you know, do this or do this if we want to adjust the sound.
That's good.
That's good.
Okay, okay. Thanks to all of you. It's so much fun to see so many people that I know, friends and family, and probably by the end of the night we'll all be family. As Ginny said, I graduated in '67 from Washburn High School, and I took off and went to Madison to go to college. I majored in textiles and clothing and home economics education, so I have a double major from the UW-Madison. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with that exactly, so I went to work for the Marshall Field Company in Chicago. I was training to be a buyer and going into management with them. And I lasted for about 11 months, and I finally said, I am not a city girl. I have to get out of Chicago. I've got to get back to Wisconsin. And that's what I did. And so I came back to Wisconsin, and I became a teacher. And I taught for 36 years in the Madison School District. But I built a house in Middleton, and that was on purpose, because I did not want, if I had children, I did not want my children to be teachers' kids. And so I was married, and I have one boy, and he has gifted me, he and his wife gifted me with 3 grandsons. I love them dearly, 15, 13, and 12. And they keep me really busy with all of their sports. They live in Mount Horeb, Wisconsin, which is a Norwegian community. And I live in Middleton, which is on the west side of Madison. So we're about 25 minutes apart. And I'm wearing a hole in the asphalt going out there, especially during COVID. I did a lot of stuff with them during the COVID time. I retired actually 16 years ago from teaching, but I'm busier now than I've ever been. I've been involved with the UWI Athletic Department, and I go to all the football and basketball games and things, and I plan tours. And I'm also on the board of the Middleton Performing Arts Center, and I go out and I scout shows, and then I produce shows similar to what Chautauqua does. And so I have met a lot of very interesting performers. Gunnar and Matthew Nelson, Ricky Nelson's sons, were really hot. You know, and so there was, you know, there are some guys like that, some people like that I met, and we are making a ton of money. And so I'm kind of hoping, I made a call to the new person at Chautauqua, and I was thinking, I sold tickets for the first time, the first show at Chautauqua. I don't want anything to happen there. And so I hope to be able to meet with some of them and maybe help them out with some of the success that we've been having. So anyhow, that's pretty much for me. Anybody have a question about me? Because then I'll roll on with. Okay, you didn't come here to hear about me. So that's okay. Let's see what we can do here. If I can get this on the, oh, it went off. No, let's see. Come on. Okay. Is that big enough? Okay. Right now, I don't know if you know anything about the EAA, but this is the week of the big convention in Oshkosh. It's just a coincidence that it's happening at the same time that we're doing this talk. I am not a pilot. I'm not a historian. I just like planes. And I go to some fly-ins and some of those kinds of things, and actually the house that I built is underneath a path, a flight path. And I think that's really wonderful, and some people wouldn't like that, but I like it. I went to breakfast at Maury Airport a week ago, and the planes were coming in and out and in and out. And I used to, I mean, as an adult, sometimes I just go out there and sit and watch them take off and land. I just like it. So I think it was because of, you know, with my father, what he did, he got me real interested in this. Okay, so this is a picture of, just after World War II, it says 1946, Earl the Flying Baker Johnson purchased several blocks in the lower west end of town, in Slabtown, for an airport for $1. 18 blocks for $1. And so this is the hangar and that had the office in it, and his new airplane, a 1946 Aeronca plane that he purchased, and he did all of this with his own money. Back then, it wasn't that expensive to get an airplane, but it would be at least $30,000 to $50,000 in today's market. But and then the one on the, so Earl is on the left-hand side. My father is on the right-hand side. He's got some of his flying gear on. Now, when you look at this picture, this was 1946. I wasn't even born yet, and I'm trying to talk about this stuff. There's only one thing that remains in this picture today. Can you figure out what it might be?
Windsock.
You're right. The windsock exists. But everything else is gone. It doesn't exist anymore. And this airport was across the street from the dollar store. You know, the dollar store has been built now? Okay, there was a great big field there, and that's the land that Earl bought. And if you have a chance, go see if you can find the windsock, because it's kind of interesting. When I gave this talk 14 years ago, I gave it to the high school kids, as I mentioned, and I had them out running all over town looking for the windsock. And then I had said that kind of where it was located, but it was located in a grove of evergreen trees, and you couldn't figure out where the windsock was at all. So this year, knowing that I was going to do this, I kept going back and trying to find the windsock, and it was still in this grove of evergreen trees. And as of March of this year, when I was here, the windsock was full of birds' nests. And it was, I thought, this will be great. You know, when I talk to you, you'll all be out trying to find this too. And I drove into town last night, and I drove by, and the windsock is totally different. One of my buddies who works for the city, and I think it was Tex Malinowski, went there and mowed the whole area so that it's all cleaned out so that you can find it easily. And no more birds' nests. I think he possibly even may have painted the windsock. So, you know, see if you can find it. But he's, you know, really nice guy, and he was doing me a favor. Okay. So I'm a Peterson, as I said. I thought I should probably tell you what Peterson clan I come from. This is my mother and my father about on their 40th wedding anniversary. So if you saw these people around town, if you remember them, these are my parents. My dad died at 89 years of age back in 2008, and my mother was 78 years old when she passed away. It was an unfortunate thing because my mother was 61 when she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and she lived for 17 years with Alzheimer's, and he took care of her the whole time. 10 years at home, and then when she stopped walking and needed to go to the nursing home, he went up there 2 times a day and fed her. And so it was a long, long struggle, but they were great parents to have. And my dad was an insurance and real estate agent, and my mother actually was a telephone operator in her day and a homemaker, and she worked part-time at his office. And yes, the telephone operators, you know, the ones that said, "Number please," and all of that, they listened in on your calls. They knew who was having an affair. They knew everything that was going on. They didn't say anything, but they knew it. So tonight what I'm planning on doing is talking a little bit about my father and about how he was involved in all of this. And the one that got me going on this 14 years ago was Gary Holman. Where are you, Gary? Back there? Oh, yeah. Okay. he called me after my father passed away, and he said that they were starting up these talks and that, and he said, we did not know about your father until we read about his obituary, and that he was a recipient of the Distinguished Flying Cross. And so, would you consider coming and talking about him? And I thought it was kind of a healing thing to do, and also to talk about him a little bit. So I did give one of these talks, and so Gary is the one who started all of this, and we'll hear from him a little bit later. But we're going to be talking about showing you some things about my father, and about the Washburn airports, and about Earl Baker Johnson. How many of you know about Baker Johnson? Okay, then I don't have to go into a lot of detail on that. I was, like I said, I was not born during this time, and so I had to do a lot of research. And I had some people that helped me. A guy by the name of John Foltz helped me by going down to the State Historical Society and looking up clippings from the Washburn Times. And Betty Ferris helped me a little bit with some of the pictures, and so I did have help from other people too. Okay. So, this is a picture of Washburn High School's basketball team in 1935, and it was a big deal because they went to state in Class C. And people were actually, they did that bit of leaving Washburn and put up a big sign and said, will the last person please turn out the lights when they leave? Because there were a lot of people down in Madison attending their game. And my father is number 3 in the front row on the left. Little guy. And that actually worked well for him when he became a pilot, because he could fit in the cockpit, whereas other people had a hard time doing it. One of his best buddies was a guy by the name of Ted Williams, who was a baseball player, a professional player for the Red Sox, I believe. And he was, and I had to look this up, he was 6'3", 205 pounds. And my dad used to say, we had to get him in that cockpit with a shoehorn. He was so big. But my dad was the fast little guard. Washburn did not have any height. Only Al Garberg was the only one that he was 6'1", and he was the tallest one. My dad weighed 108 pounds, so soaking wet. But it was, like I say, okay to be small. They played in the field house in Madison, and it was new at that time. And it was so new to them because the scoreboard was in the center of the court, hanging from the rafters. And they were used to gymnasiums where there was a flag on one end and the other end had a scoreboard. So they could keep things straight, but having the scoreboard in the middle was really confusing for them. And my dad got clunked on the head during the game. And so he was disoriented, and he got up and he grabbed the ball, and like I said, he was really fast. They played a 1-2-2 offense, and he was the point guard. And he took off for the basket, and he couldn't imagine why people weren't really chasing him. He was headed for the wrong basket. And he went down and he made a layup. The only problem was he missed the basket for the wrong team. He loved telling that story. He laughed, about his mistake. He thought that was really funny. But maybe some of you know some of the names of these people. I don't know if you can read them way in the back. Front row is Tom Peterson, and then Carl Thorson, Winston Hansen. Sonny Nelson was a big buddy of his. Bud Kaler, and Persh Kirshner. That's the front row. Back row, Tom Pratt, John Durkin. The coach was Marshall. He also coached football. And Al Garberg, he was the tallest one. And then Andy Johnson. So these, they went down, they lost their first game, they lost the consolation game, but they represented Washburn pretty well, I think. Now, my dad graduated in 1937, and most of these people did, most of these men. But the school name was not Washburn High School. Anybody know what it was? Walker High School, very good. That was Walker High School. And in 1935, the mascot was changed to Castle Guards. Do you know what it was before? There you go. Did know. The Crimson Tide, and if you couldn't hear it way back there. So, after graduating from high school in 37, my dad went to work for the DuPont company. He did not, they didn't have career education in school. He didn't know what he wanted to do. His dad had worked at that time for 34 years for the DuPont company. And so it was just natural to go to work for them. DuPont made the TNT for World War I and World War II. So that was, and my dad had terrible headaches when he was working there, from working on the powder line or whatever line it was. And so his job was to train others. And he traveled to other DuPont plants to do so. My dad, he was, I know I'm bragging, but he was a smart guy. And I know he was the best teacher I ever had in all of my education. He could explain things so well. And that's probably why he got this job as being a traveling training person for DuPont. He did not have any college at all. He had heard his father and mother talking about putting his two older sisters through college. And he said, I don't want to put them through that again. So he had decided that he would not go to college, and he would try to figure out, how to maybe pay for it himself if he was going to go on to do that. In my opinion, he really should have gone on to college. Everything would have been a lot easier for him, and he was a great problem solver. And like I say, the best teacher I ever had. And so I think that's probably what made him a talented pilot and an instructor later in life. Then, December 7th, 1941, what happened? Pearl Harbor. And so he had been working since graduation at the DuPont plant. And he just, he said, and then on December 8th, what happened? Yeah, declared war? Yeah, that's what it was. It was also my Aunt Arlene's birthday. So that's one of the ways I remember it. But he said that he could have gotten a deferment because he was working at DuPont. But he decided that he felt that he needed to do something else. And he said, oh, and I have to tell you this. Some of this information that I'm giving to you is not just my memory kind of stuff. There was a man that after my dad passed away, 3 days after the funeral, he came up to the apartment where I live here in town, and he gave me a CD that was my dad talking when he was 84 years old, and his voice was clear and he was sharp, and he interviewed my dad about his life in Washburn and how he made decisions and about his flying and so forth. And I have all of that, and I listen to it every once in a while. It's a good thing to listen to when I'm traveling from Middleton to Washburn and get connected. So a lot of the stuff I'm telling you is right from his mouth, what he said. And in regard to talking about this deferment or whatever, his words were, what would I tell my future children what I did in the war effort if I just keep working at DuPont? And I heard the first time I heard that, and I burst into tears because I thought, that child is me. I'm an only child. So it's quite a story about how he got involved with the service. He went down to Minneapolis and he wanted to enlist in the Navy, and they wouldn't take him because he didn't have 4 years of college. They wouldn't even talk to him. And so he was sent back home, and the recruiter kept calling and talking to him and saying, are you still interested in keep in touch with us and all of that. So for 1943, almost the whole year, he worked on trying to enlist, and it took a long time for this to happen. But finally, he got a telephone call, and they said, we had been taking 4-year college grads, and now we can't get any more 4 years college grads. So we'll take a 2-year college grad. And my dad said, sorry, I don't have any college. And the guy said, come on down anyhow, and we'll see what we can do. So he went down, and he was in a group of 30 people, it was all men, 30 men that had a test that they had to take. And they didn't expect my dad to do well on it at all, and he aced it, and he got the highest score of anybody of the college grads, and he was pretty proud of that. So he was able to enlist, and he enlisted with the Navy on December 15th, 1942. And he was sent to aviation training at Iowa Pre-Flight School, and then to Minneapolis. And so he said it was like going to boot camp in many of these cases. And he had been involved in a lot of sports, and he felt confident, but he hated swimming, and especially in a pool. And the instructors were really mean. And if somebody got a cramp or something and wanted to get out of the pool, they got a boot in the face and pushed right back into the water again. And so he didn't like that part of it. But what he did learn was stunt maneuvers. He could be a stunt pilot with all the stuff that they learned on that. Crosswinds, formation flying, flying with live ammunition, and pulling out of a stall. Those are the kinds of things that I was able to learn from that CD that they learned there. So he then, let's see, he became, this was after his first solo flight. And he was real excited about this because, he could, after you're solo, that's a real big deal for them. And he then learned after that things like he had to take courses in mathematics, navigation, geometry, survival, and plane recognition in 1943. So you probably have seen that on maybe like Top Gun or some of these movies that are on TV, how they would flash planes up, and the aviators would have to be able to identify if they were friendly or if they were foe, and they'd have to identify what kind of a plane they were in. And so that's the recognition kinds of things that they did. Okay, why isn't she going? There we go. So this is what he looked like when he was the second lieutenant, Thomas K. Peterson, and he was trained in a Corsair plane. And some of you, I bet, know Corsairs, right? Peterson's back there. And this is, I wanted to find something that you could identify with, because I have this in my bedroom up here. It's easy to find. This is a Corsair, and it has a bent wing.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. And so that was something that was very recognizable. And actually, when I was born years after this, but normally kids go around the house going like this, like an airplane. I was like this. Because that's what I was taught, to have the bent wing from the Corsair. Yeah. And I could tell you that I'm going ahead a little bit because at this point I haven't been born yet. But when little kids learn their first songs, like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and whatever, my dad actually became a Marine, and I learned from the halls of Montezuma. That was the first song that I ever learned. and I said, to the shores of Tripoli. I didn't, a little kid, I didn't know. And I think I probably learned when I was about 35 that the word was Tripoli, not Tripoli. So what happened was, my dad was to get his wings in Pensacola, Florida. And it was a big day for him for many reasons. He was in the Navy, flying the Corsair, and some general came along, and he said that the Corsairs are too, he tested it out, and it's too difficult of a plane to fly. So this Navy general said, I don't want my guys flying the Corsairs anymore. Well, here's this whole squadron of guys that have been trained on the Corsair, and they love it. And my dad was asked, what do you think about the Corsair? Wonderful. It's a wonderful plane. I just love it. So what those guys did, and they worked this all out behind the scenes, and it was all okay. But they got their wings, and they graduated, and then they went over to the Navy office, and they all resigned. And then they walked across the street, and they joined the Marines. So, and then, about an hour after that, my dad married my mother. She had taken the train down to Pensacola and met him down there. But the problem was, she had come early and she was staying in this hotel, and she got caught in the rain and she got drenched and everything. So she missed this whole graduation because she had to go to the beauty parlor and get her hair fixed. That sounds normal, doesn't it? We would do that. Excuse me here. Okay. So that I can always remember when he got his wings because that was there, January 14th, 1944. And this was, if I can get this. Oh, poo. Oh, I guess I can. No, I can't do it. Let's see if I can go back. No, we're going forward. Oh. Oh well, it's okay. I just wanted to show you here that this is the real Corsair. Can you see the bent wing? Yeah, and that's my dad. Okay, so this is what they wore, and it was cold in these planes. They had no heat, and they were going up pretty doggone high, and they didn't have anything. They had really heavy gear that they were wearing, and you can see that here. He had this flight jacket and wore it around town for many years. He loved it so much. And he actually left the Marine Corps with 3 flight jackets. And he ended up, we had a family here in Washburn that was from Vietnam, and this family didn't have a lot. And my dad gave one of his flight jackets to Ha Fan, if you know that family at all. And then my mother had one, and he had one, and his is all ripped up. I thought, I cannot bring that over here tonight, because a Marine would not want anybody to see his flight jacket looking like that, but that's what he wore. And these were his gloves. This is what they had to wear when they were flying. And I can't imagine how you handle a stick in a plane when you've got something this bulky that you have to wear. But what they also did too was a lot of times they cut the tips off of the gloves. Do you know why? Anybody know why? Because they wanted to be able to see their fingernails. Because if their fingers started turning gray, then they knew they weren't getting enough oxygen. And so they had to either up the oxygen or fly lower or do something about that. But they looked at their fingertips, and so. You know, I think how far we've come. You know, when you think about, I'm a little bit under 5 foot now. I can hardly get up in this chair, so I'm not coming down a lot. And also he had. Oh, I can show you. I think I've got it here. What did I do with it? Just 1 minute. Oh, pooh. Maybe it's in the back. I have a copy. I have his logbook for flying, and I copied off a couple pages from the logbook. And oh, wait a minute, I do have it here. No, I don't. It's in red. He flew. We were sitting watching television one night, and President Bush. They were talking about President Bush, the first one, and he had flown 58 combat missions. And my dad, and they were talking about him being a hero. I can still see my father getting out of the chair, going back in the bedroom, looking in the filing cabinet and bringing out, and I said, well, what'd you find? And he said, I guess I'm a hero. Because he had flown many more than President Bush had flown. And so on the logbook, what I've duplicated, if I can find where I put it, every one that is a training mission that he has entered is in black. And all of the combat missions are in red. And I only have 2 pages out of it that I photocopied to bring here, but it's amazing how many were red, the combat missions that he flew. So both Bush and my dad were awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, as I mentioned, and the quote on it says, heroism or extraordinary achievement while participating in an aerial flight. I do have some of my dad's, most of my dad's medals on the back table back there that have been framed, and the Distinguished Flying Cross is one of them. Something that I have here about the gear, though, I just thought, there's a letter that he wrote back to his buddies, and it's about the day in the life of a pilot, and he was in Okinawa in 1942, and it is 9 pages long. But this is in the museum on display, and you can go over and you can read any of what he's written here. And I just thought I would tell you a little bit about some of the, let's see, okay. He got up in the morning, and let's see, where should I start? I dressed in half asleep and stumbled over to the mess hall when I came to the conclusion that my shoes were on, vice versa. The java was hot, but very weak, and the cereal looked like wallpaper paste that my mother used to use for wallpapering. After chow, I put on my flight suit and rode the pilot's truck over to the line, having 30 minutes before going on a standby alert. And a standby alert is to sit in your plane ready for immediate takeoff in case of an air raid. The hardest task was pulling on my flight gear, which consisted of a Mae West life jacket, a flashlight, a compass, first aid kit, a canteen of water, a .45 Colt automatic with 3 extra clips, and I still have that, of ammo, oxygen mask, water dye marker, helmet and goggles, gloves, and last but not least, the 60-pound parachute to complete the jungle kit and 1-man life raft. He had to carry all that onto the plane with him. You know, that would, I think he told me it was about 80 pounds that he would have to take back there. So, you know, this is kind of, I think, kind of an interesting letter, because he didn't know that I would be sharing, or anybody would be sharing something like this with the public. And he had a pimple on his behind, and he was really miserable, and so it was sore. But that's kind of the comic relief in this whole thing. So it might be something you might want to check out. Okay, so this is him in his plane. Now take a look at this one. That's one of his planes too. And it was in the newspaper, in one of the publications for the Marines, and it was titled, "And He Walked Away." We don't know much about this event. He never showed this to me at all. I found it in a scrapbook, and then he was talking to a guy by the name of John Blahnik, who was in town here, and that's how I found out about this. He had gone up on a bombing mission and in Okinawa, and he had a hung bomb. He couldn't get rid of the bomb. And he flew all over the place and went up, did all that stunt flying, rolls and spins and dives and all of that, and he couldn't shake it. He went over the water and was hoping that he could ditch it in the ocean, and he couldn't ditch it. So he called down to the airport and he said, "Have an ambulance ready, have some fire trucks ready, because I'm going to land this thing with the bomb on it." And they said, "Ditch the plane in the water." And he said, "No, this plane is too precious. I don't want to go swimming. I don't like swimming." But I said, like I said, I don't know exactly where this was and what time of year, or anything like that. But there's a lot of stories that I could continue to tell. But this is just one of them. And he walked out of this plane, and the only thing that was left was their sheet metal in the back of the cockpit, and that was intact. But you can kind of see that you see where the propeller is on the left side, and then the back of the plane was totally blown off. And he was lucky to be alive, and he walked out of there, and he had blood dripping down the side of his cheeks. And what he had done was he broke both eardrums, and that's all it was. So he had some angels watching over him. Something else I can tell you, during that time, he flew in he was told to go to a squadron that was called the Black Sheep Squadron. Have you heard of them? There's a show on television up here, not so much where I live, but it's called the Black Sheep Squadron, and their leader was Patty Boyington. You don't know about that show on television? It's an oldie but goodie. Okay, well, he was assigned to this, and he only stayed 2 weeks, and he said, "I want out." And of course, on the television show, they're like funny guys, and they're doing good things. He said it's not the way it was. Pappy Boyington had been captured by the Japanese, and he was being paraded through the streets of Tokyo. He had been beaten heavily, and he could hardly walk, and they would send news clips to the United States, or they would try to show it on United States television of Pappy Boyington. Well, his squadron was hot that they were doing that to his leader. And so go in and check out, where are the ammunition dumps, where are the planes, where are the hangars, and also where are the hospitals and the schools and the churches. And they would make decisions about what they were going to bomb the next day. Pappy Boyington's squad went in and wiped out everything. Everything. And my dad wouldn't do that. He said, I saw nuns with kids in their hands, taking them to the church, to try to hide them when they would hear the planes coming over. And he said, I just couldn't handle that. So he asked, and he was assigned to a different squadron. Those are the kind of things we don't know about, usually. He also flew over Hiroshima in 1945 after the bomb had been dropped there. And he got into big trouble, he and another guy, because it was an unauthorized flight. They stole a plane, 2 planes, and they took off and they flew over because they wanted to know what all the hoopla was. They didn't get the information over there like we get here. And so he flew over that, and what's this orange cloud, that we're going through, and all that. And so, but he got in trouble for that. And one other thing that I'll tell you is every pilot hates landing on aircraft. And he was one of them that hated that. He said, when you're up in the air and you're looking down at that aircraft down there, and you're supposed to land, it looks like a postage stamp, and you just pray that that hook is going to catch your plane when you come down. But I still watch all the Tom Cruise movies and all of that landing. But I have a little bit of a different feeling about some of it. So while he was in Okinawa, he wrote a letter to Earl Johnson. And I have a copy of this. He says, hello, Earl. I just got word about your new airport. It sure does my heart good to know that someone up there is interested in aviation. Keep up the good work, and maybe we will have a bunch of pilots up that way yet. Maybe after the war, you will let me come and mow the grass at the airport in exchange for a little flight time in your Cub. Because Earl had a small plane called an Aranca. According to the clipping I got out of the newspaper, you only have 18 lots for your airport. That may be big enough for your Cub, but you will have to make it a little bit longer so that I can land my Corsair down there. How about checking me out? And then he wants to get different licensing, and he goes on. He had licensing for instructing for the big planes, but he didn't have the certification for small planes, and he was going to get into that, and hopefully. I'm really picking up hours over here. I'll be over 1,000 before I head back to the United States again. I haven't been lucky enough to catch, and I'm sorry, but he always talked about Jap planes. It was when you're in the service and you're fighting against somebody, they're not always Japanese. They're sometimes referred to them as Japs, and I corrected him every time, but it didn't do any good. Let's see. I hope to see one of these days. I've been up in their face, in their front yard, looking for them, but they seem to keep them on the ground for more reasons or another. How about, and then he asked for, would you please write me back? Because they lived for those letters, to get something back. And he said, I expect to be home in December to keep your plane wound up for me. Best of luck, Earl, and I hope I can help you promote aviation up in the area. It's a little hard to read this, it's not real clear. So there was talk of an airport up north, and it was Paul Robinson. You know that name from the Washburn Times? Okay, Paulie Robinson actually is a Shertel relative too, but he was the editor of the Times back in the 1920s, and he was writing reports and editorials and that, trying to get because he was a huge promoter of aviation up there, but he wasn't, nobody else was really listening to him. But he wrote things like, Charles Lindbergh's solo flight across the Atlantic was in May of '27, and now President Coolidge was coming to vacation in Bayfield County. And Robinson wanted Washburn to realize the future opportunities. His editorials calling for the need of an airport appeared in a number of papers in 1928. And so in 1933, there was a Dr. Jocelyn that was starting to fly up here. And Dr. Jocelyn was a physician in Mayward, Illinois, near Chicago, and he would like to stay out at Rocky Run Resort. It was owned by Maxie's then, that was the name, but you kind of know where Rocky Run, when I talk about that? Okay, you know where that is? He had Naranka, and he was capable of cruising at 70 miles per hour. And the Times stated, this flight should bring home to Washburnites the fact that the age of aviation is upon us and should demonstrate the immediate necessity of building a local airport if we are to keep pace with the times. Part of it was, too, I found out Ashland was getting an airport. And Washburn did not want to be behind Ashland. We have a good site atop Washington Avenue. Can you imagine an airport on top of Washington Avenue? I can't, that doesn't seem right. Now is the time to do it. A month later, Dr. Jocelyn was killed in a plane crash in Elmhurst, Illinois, 2 weeks after getting his license. The excitement of flying also died with this tragedy, and talking about the airport too. Nobody wanted to talk about it again. So what did they do? They started an airport down on, a seaplane airport, down on the bottom of 8th Avenue. And this was a government-sponsored thing from the National Youth Administration. And they wanted to have a seaplane base as part of the preparedness program. They kind of thought, from the reading that I've been able to do, that we always thought that the war would be fought in Europe, but there might be the chance that it was going to hit the States too. And so why do you think the government wanted to build a seaplane airport by 8th Avenue? Any ideas? DuPont plant. Because if there was going to be bombing in the States, one of the first ones they would probably hit would be the DuPont plant. And so they hired around 30 people that were youngsters. They were 16 to 25-year-olds, and it was kind of like the CCC organization from what I've been able to gather. And they hired 19 men to work on the base, and there were 17 girls that were in the office. This whole thing was really sexist at that time. And I look at this and I think girls can work on a base. Too, they could do all of that. The city council gave them $200 to start the project. And the workers were paid 31 cents an hour, and they worked 46 hours a month. And so they made about $14.26 a month. So that was, and then the project folded in 1941. And why was that? Because we entered the war, in 41, and we knew it was going to be fought in Europe and not necessarily fought in the United States proper. So that whole idea died. That airport died. And if you were here for, there was a Mr. Simino that talked about Slabtown Town. He talked about this airport. So I'm not going into great detail with it, but it's kind of interesting and to think about. A seaplane airport. I'd never heard of that before, especially in Washburn. So then and then in 1944, 16 years after Polly Robinson first was calling in his editorials for an airport, along came Earl Johnson, and with plans of an airstrip. And this one was firm on the ground, not on the water. The Lions Club recommended that the City Council endorse a proposal for an airport. Johnson was a member of the council, so Mr. Peterson made the proposal for the Lions Club. I can't imagine, I don't know what Mr. Peterson it would have been. Maybe my grandfather, or maybe your grandfather's, or whatever. I don't know how it was spelled, And so they got a topographical survey, and they started looking at an airport, and they sold the 18 lots to Earl for the $1 that I mentioned, and so the airport was on its way. So do you kind of have an idea where this airport was? It's across Highway 13, and there was a big long stretch. Now, right now there's a house right in the middle of it. Because I go and I walk that airport every once in a while, and the Airstrip, and just kind of check it out, get the feel for it. By the beginning of 1946, He had invested $3,000 of his own money, which I figured out is about $40,000 today. And this was his own money. There was a runway, 1,800 feet long, which ran east to west. And it had hard-packed dirt. It wasn't a grass strip or anything. There was the hangar in the office that you saw, and plans for a future investment of another $30,000 from Earl. So he was on his way with all of that. Okay, so I'm looking at that lineup. Oh, this is what I was looking for. It's all out of sequence. This is my mom and dad on their wedding day. Okay, so this is what the airport kind of looked like. You can maybe get a feel of it. You can see the Aranca plane, a 1946 Aranca plane at the bottom. And then I think I'm gonna see if I can find this. They came and they started a flying club in '46. After my dad got out of the war in December of '45, came home, Earl hired him. He begged Earl. There's a letter that I have here, saying about, would you please hire me? I'd like to fly for you. And so they had, and this is my dad flying in one of the planes, but learn to fly is, now I don't know if you can read all of this, how clear it's going to be, but the flying club had steps to fly. You had to buy a logbook for $1, and all your time had to be put in that. And then for a student license, you had to apply to the CAA and Wool Chamberlain Field in Minneapolis and get a medical certificate from a local doctor for $3. And then you had to have 8 hours of dual instruction, know your airplane, how to start the engine, taxiing straight, and level flight and turns and so forth. So anyhow, they had all this spelled out about the different levels of licensing. And the problem was that Earl Johnson never got what he should get. He didn't have the time. He had a bakery shop in town, and he didn't have the time to go flying, and my dad he would come to my dad and say, Tom, please just sign off on this, that I've done this, kind of stuff. And my dad said, no, I haven't given you the instruction. One of the things I think was stalling out. He didn't have the instruction in how to take care of some of that. But this was his, well, let's see. This was what Earl looked like back then. And they had this flying club that they started. Now, you might recognize some names that were in this. President was Hannum Homan. What did Hannum Homan do? Barber. He was the barber. Vice President was Alvin Bradley. What did he do? The undertaker. Secretary Treasurer Jack Walton worked at DuPont. Publicity Chairman Bob Lindsay, also at DuPont. Other members, Clyde Porter, David Welty. Now that's Terry Welty's brother. Ray Niskanen, Carl Thorson, Earl Johnson, Thomas K. Peterson, that was my dad, and Roger Bodine. And the instructor and manager was my dad, Thomas Peterson, and he was from the Marines, and Roger Bodine was from the Navy, and he was another instructor. So, yeah. What did you say, Warren?
You guided the plane crash.
Yes, he did. I was going to get to that, but that's okay. He was a member of the, they had 6 men that were on the board of the Bank of Washburn. And they were flying to a meeting in Cable. And they crashed, and all 6 were killed. And so, Roger Bodine was one of them. There was well, maybe you can help me out on this, some of you. Bruno, maybe? Frenchy Bruno? Yeah. The one person that decided he did not want to go on that plane because he wanted to take his own car was Bob Spears. So he did not crash. And so then after that, they had to find people to be on the board, and my dad was one of them that was asked to be on the bank board. Yeah. So anyhow, when they were learning how to fly, they had this deal of getting into the air, special offer, for only $60. They could learn how to fly. And it was and you see it, attention residents of Washburn, Bayfield, Barksdale, Cornucopia, Herbster, Port Wayne, and Iron River. No Ashland in this. And so this is, and you know, to contact my father. And they would fly at the bottom, bobber's attention. Oh, that's what they called ice fishermen, I found out. And it says, fly to your favorite ice fishing spot. We will fly you out and pick you up whenever you want. Only $3 for both trips. To charter a plane like this now would be about $300. Yeah, to do something like that. So it was just a different life. Okay. Okay, these were some pictures about flying out of, they went down to the West End Park, and they would fly out of there and then go out and land on the frozen lake. Okay, so this one I think is kind of interesting. This is the picture in the middle on the right-hand side is a picture of Earl, and this was a posed shot. The guy that was writing this article from the Duluth News-Tribune wanted to talk about the ice fishing and that. So Earl landed right over the top of a hole, and he dropped a line into the water, and he pulled out a fish that had been caught probably weeks ahead of time, and it was stiff as a board. And that's what they used for the publicity shot. On the left-hand side of the plane is Rudy Gagel. And then on the bottom, one of those pictures down at the bottom is Frenchie. What was his name? Frenchie Bruno. Yeah, that was one of him. So they did things like this too to try to get some interest going. And so then what happened was, in the same year, in 1946, it got really bad with polio around here, and that was the polio epidemic. And I looked up some information about this. Just in Bayfield County, there were 764 cases in Wisconsin in 1 year of polio. And 221 were reported in 1 month, and there were 49 deaths. So they had, you can't read a lot of this where you are, but in this little box over here, it says that Spears made the decision, this was Spears' dad, that all the schools would be closed, and the churches and everything would be closed because of the polio epidemic, and so that's what they had to do. So,
What year?
46. This is all in 46 that they're flying in Washburn. And so then, Earl Johnson started flying people down to Minneapolis. And he made flights that were kind of illegal because he didn't have the licensing to do that. And he wasn't supposed to fly more than 150 miles away from his own home airport. And he was doing it because he would get a phone call in the middle of the night from a Dr. Tandy here saying, it's 1 o'clock in the morning, but we've got to get this guy to Minneapolis. If we don't get him in an iron lung soon, he is going to die. And so Earl he never had learned how to fly in the night like that, had no lights or anything. And so he would take off, he took off with this van and got him down to Minneapolis in time to get in the iron lung, but he did die. But they had, in 40 hours time, he made 3 flights to Minneapolis and back. He was doing things like this, and to me, Earl was a hero. They flew blood around too, and he did. He was doing all of this just because he felt that it was important to do that. So then, come on up, Dave. Something happened on Thanksgiving. Earl called my dad up and said, Tom, we've got a day off work, let's go flying, it's a beautiful day. And my dad said, I can't do it because I've got an appointment to have 4 snow tires put on my car in the morning, and then I've got to help Kathleen with the meal for Thanksgiving. And my dad said, let's do it tomorrow. And Earl said, oh no, it's a beautiful day, I want to go up. So, David's going to take over. This is David Bradley. Well, here. Jenny, do you have your microphone?
Mary's got it on.
Oh, okay, let's take that one, then I don't have to be unconnected. Back in 1946, Dave was 8 years old.
Well, I think, whoops,
It's okay, this thing is tipsy.
yeah. 1946 was Thanksgiving Day. It was the night before we had 20 below zero, and it's when I was, but we went down. My dad came down, and he owned the Piper Cub. Johnson owned the Arantka. We worked on Johnson's plane, the Arantka, for 2.5 to 3 hours because it wouldn't start. And my dad's plane started. The Cub was no problem, but they worked on that and they worked on that, and finally they got it going. Well, anybody knows Baker Johnson, and at that time, he wasn't very patient. And, you know, all of them were telling him, let this plane get nice and warm and let it run for an hour. And he said, oh, no, I'm going up. And so he taxied down the runaway. Fortunately, he wanted somebody to go up with him, but nobody did. I think they were afraid at that point. So, and he got down to the end of the runaway and he took off. Got over the wires that was at the end of the runaway, and normally at that point you continue to climb until you get proper height and proper speed, and all of a sudden he got over the wires and he turned a left and started to follow the highway. So we all suspected that, he's going to try to land. It's on the highway. So he had to have been having some problems at that point. And then we watched one there was going to go down the highway and see where he was or what happened to him. But all of a sudden we saw him coming back. And he was south of the airport. And he was, he was flying awfully slow. And everybody made comments, oh, what is he doing? And then all of a sudden, it's like somebody grabbed the tip of the tail, and he just pivoted down and went straight down. So he stalled out at that point. When he hit the ground, fortunately it was at a little incline, so that may have taken some of the impact, but he was knocked out, and so we were at the airport, and my dad was behind him going to take off. Well, he saw something was not right, so he came back, and so then we. Dad and Terry, not Terry Welty, but David Welty, which is Terry's older brother. We got in the car, we went down to the crash site, and he was unconscious, so They got him out of the plane. And then my dad and Dave Welty, they took me home. And then Dad went down to the funeral home, and he got the hearse. And then they went down and they brought him to the hospital in Ashland. And at that time, that's what we did. I mean, the hearse was the ambulance. It's in Washburn at that time. And my dad would transfer a lot of people to the hospital.
Can I just add something too?
Yeah.
They didn't have a pallet to put Earl on. So Mrs. Hebert ran home and got her ironing board.
Yeah. So, they took him to the hospital. He was unconscious for 2 weeks. Everybody was sort of worried that he wasn't going to pull out of it, but he did. And but he was different after that. He was left with some problems, and I never found out if he would come down and ride with others for a while, but he never really purchased a plane, but he did later on. He went to Ashland. He got an air coupe. I don't know if he rented it or what. And he came over Washburn, called my dad, and he says, "You can't stall air coupes." He says, "But I'm going to stall it." Well, he didn't stall it. But I don't know how he got to go up in that plane. It must have been belonging to somebody else, but I never saw him fly again, and he just rode with others. But his first plane. Can you mention that?
What, the first plane?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, his first plane, he had before he bought the Aeronca. He had another plane. I'm not sure what it was, but he also crashed that one. But it wasn't his fault. It's he flew out of Ashland, and after he flew out, the power company went strung some lines across the airport into the runway. And so he came back not realizing that, so he hit the wires. And he flipped over and went down on his top, but it damaged the plane so bad. But that's why I think he purchased the Aeronca. So, but it's I might want to say too, it's at that time Earl, before he crashed, they would take out ice fishermen, and they did and they got paid for it. So he was making some pretty good money doing that. So he did it a lot, and my dad did that too. So, and taking too long.
You're fine. Is he fine?
Anyway, when they take ice fishermen out, and at that time the ice would freeze way out. You could go out as far as Outer Island and stuff like that. They always carried bricks. It is in the airplane. And before they landed on the ice out there, they would drop a brick. And if the brick went through, then they wouldn't land there. So,
Don't you just love these stories? This is great. I think maybe we need to move on and if you have questions in that of Dave, and like Jenny said afterwards, we'll be around. Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay, just to add to what David was saying, that my dad felt really bad when he had been, asked by Earl to go flying and said, "I can't do it, that this day, let's go tomorrow." But he said that crash would have never happened if I had been with him. And he, kind of banked the turn too fast or whatever. And but he was a witness of all of this, so he knows really. And I'm just reading this kind of thing and talking to people. But my dad felt so bad, so he spent a lot of time over at the hospital reading to him while he was comatose, and he shaved him. And he would, he was happy when he was able to come home a couple days before Christmas. So he made it home for Christmas. Yeah, and so I do have somebody else, some other people that I would like to introduce to you too. We have Catherine and Earl's granddaughters here with us. Kathy and Tracy. And they have stories that they can tell you about what he was like what their remembrances of him were. Do you want to share any now, or do you want to wait till after? Wait after? Okay. Because probably many of us know stories about Earl skiing at Asheville Bay. Yeah. Like, he couldn't stop. And so, yeah, he took out my mom and dad that were standing on the hill and another couple. He got 4 at one time. And I just think of that as like a bowling ball coming down and wiping out all the pins, But he would, one time I ran into the chalet when my parents were having a cup of coffee in there, and I was a little kid, and I said, "Dad, you got to get out here and help Earl. He's stuck in the tree." And there was one tree at the bottom of the hill, and he had gone down through the cars and then got into this tree, and he was hanging upside down, and his skis were up like this, and everybody's got stories like that about Earl, and these gals do too, about their grandfather. I was going to mention there was one woman that really loved to fly around here that he would tell me about. And maybe you know her, Dorothy Peterson, another Peterson, but not related to any of us, but she was a Stefanski. Dorothy Stefanski, does that ring a bell? Okay. She was quiet and shy, and she had arthritis pretty badly, from what my mother told me. And she stayed home a lot, but boy, if she could get up in that plane, she was a happy camper, She would beg him to take her up. And then do everything you can, Tom. I want to dive. I want to roll. I want to, all that stunt flying that he had learned, he did that with Dorothy. And it really made her happy, with all of her problems that she had. So what I wanted to do was to mention today about what's going on in flying today. And the licensing that people have to get now depends on the type and the age of the plane being used. But my son has a friend that is taking flying lessons right now. And so I said, well, ask Jared about this. What is the cost to fly now? And Jared said, it's $10,000 probably is a good estimate to get a license, $10,000 now. You could get it done as little as $8,000 if you studied hard and devoted yourself to it. 40 hours of flight time is the minimum required, with the cost being right around $150 to $200 an hour, depending on where you go. So so then I called my airport, right, which is about 2 miles away from my house, and I asked them, and they said, someone better figure between $10,000 and $15,000 to get a license. So I said, well, these two don't conflict at all. So then this gal I was talking to gave me a number in Verona, Wisconsin, and it's called Capital Flight, and she said, just talk to this lady about this, because she's a pilot, her husband's a pilot. And she told me that they fly 2-year-old planes, and they are Cirrus. Now, do you know that name from here? Yeah. And she told me that a Cirrus plane costs $700,000.
Oh my.
And I said, well, how much for a license? Well, between $40,000 and $50,000 to get a license besides that. She said, you probably don't know this, but the company started in Baraboo. And I said, well, we know about it because it was in Duluth. And it still is, isn't it? They still operate, yeah. And they have a parachute system, which you probably have read about. And it was an individual seat parachute, but now they've got a full plane parachute. If something happens, one parachute will pop out and will land the whole plane. But now what they've done too is they have something that they developed, she was telling me about, called safe return system. If the pilot is incapacitated, like maybe has a heart attack or bumps his head or something like that, they have the technology to find out where that plane is and to guide it to land remotely. And so it's kind of reminds me of, what is it, the Tesla, where you don't have, it's driverless. Well, they can do that with this plane too. They can land the plane pilotless too. And it's got built-in car seats for kids, and it's got, she's trying to justify to me why it's so doggone expensive. They've got satellite radio, and so I said to her, well, okay, what type of person buys a plane like this? Is it someone is it corporations that buy planes like yours? And she said, no, it's 40 to 60-year-old people that want a plane like this so that they can take their kids up, and they've got the money and they fly all over the place. But when I was 40 to 60, I couldn't have done that at all. So let me ask you this: airports in this area. Where was one that an airstrip or an airport? Ashland, right? Okay, and Mid-State, I don't know, what do they call it now? I called it Mid-State Air Commuter. I flew on it once. I don't know what it's called now.
Republic.
What is it?
Republic Airlines.
Republic, okay. I just remember when I was living in Chicago, I wanted to come home, and so I flew on that, and of course it was okay because my dad knew the pilot. And that was all right, and he was a Murado, and so that exists. But do you know of any other landing strips or that around here?
Madeline.
Where?
Madeline.
Cable, yeah. And Warren, what? Madeline. Cornucopia. Okay, I remember. So we've got some landing strips around here. So when I found out about some of this, I wanted to find out. Cornucopia has a 3100 runway, and it became public in 2022. Before that, it was private. And so people about 3 weeks ago came from Middleton up here, where I'm from, and they had about 20 planes, I think, that landed in Cornucopia. And what they do is they have a building there that has lots of bicycles in it. So they can get out of their plane, hop on a bicycle, and bicycle into town and eat and shop in Cornucopia. And then it's because it's near where the ice caves are at Myers Beach. I guess it's somewhere close to that. There's also the old dairy field in Washburn. Do you know that we have an airstrip here?
Behind Good Time?
But that's not operational.
Oh yeah, it's an operation.
Is it really?
Yes. Okay, for those of you who don't know, it's right behind what we used to call Club Lido, but it's now the Good Time restaurant.
Right.
It's behind there on the lake, and there's a landing strip, 2,000 foot, and it's owned by Kerry Bouchard. Does that ring a bell? Okay, and so I talked to him for about an hour. I've never met him. Nice man. The whole family is flying. Yeah, sister-in-law, 3 children, they're all flying. But what he does, in case you don't know, is he takes his small plane out of this airstrip and he flies down to Dallas, where he meets his big plane, and he flies for American Airlines. And that's what his, I think it would be his sister-in-law does. This is Kerry.
Carrie flies.
Kerry Bouchard. How old would he be, would you think? 50s?
His kids are in their 20s.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they were all pilots, all of them, and to think that we have that right here. So I had to go out there, and I Murado, the guy who is the caretaker of it now, and he and his wife are the volleyball coaches for Wisconsin when they were. Well, not for Wisconsin, for Washburn, when they were really, really good, you know. And so I had a nice conversation with him, and he took me in his truck and drove me all over, you know. And they're welcome. They welcome anybody to come out and to look at the field or to use their airport too. But I couldn't get any of them to come and talk here tonight because they're all flying right now, and they want to be home for homecoming. They want their whole family home that flies. The 3 children fly out of Tennessee. And so, and Carrie is flying out of Dallas. So, and then also, the has 2 runways because Kennedy came here and spoke for 10 minutes. And what?
He died about a week or 2 later.
2 months. 2 months after he was here, he was assassinated. Yeah. So I've been doing a lot of research, people. I felt like I wanted to do that. I'm just kind of, I think what we'll do is, Gary, would you come up? Where's Gary? Okay. Do you have a microphone for Gary? Seeing he got me into this 14 years ago, I thought I would say, okay, Gary. This is our poet laureate from Washburn, Gary Holman.
That's generous of you. Well, as customary, I haven't done a lot of research, so I must apologize. This is not quite as tidy a presentation as I'd like it to be, and I've missed some of the names of the people that were in the original flying clubs. My apologies to friends and relatives if your name doesn't appear in this little thing. So here it goes. Tom K. Peterson, a pilot from World War II, went back home. He and Earl thought a flying club would be a good thing to do. Alvin Bradley, Uncle Hannum, Dave Welty, and Jack Welton got the call to be flying club members, but I don't remember all. Those daring young men with their flying machine and their less impressed wives, if you know what I mean, bought a blue Piper Cub with yellow wings and tail and a St. Christopher medal in the hope it wouldn't fail. The office and hangar was across from Roddy's Beer Bar. The Airstrip was on Omaha Street, where you can now drive your car. Earl Johnson, famed baker, owned an Avanca, all yellow. Earl was a flyer, a skier, and interesting fellow. When polio came and people were struck, he flew victims to the cities with skill and some luck. By day or by night, his craft took to flight with car lights lighting the runway to aid his night sight. Alas, Earl crashed one cold November day and spent weeks in a coma, ending his airplay. This brief, colorful era of aviation in our city has long since come to an end, and that is a pity.
You know, when you think about it, I mentioned earlier, to me, this kind of person like Earl was really a hero. To just know that there was a need in this area for his services, and even though he didn't have the right licensing, and he had a business in town, and he had children and all of that, he took the time to do the right thing. And that's why I think we should have an Earl Johnson Boulevard or something like that.
Instead of Omaha.
So
Instead of Omaha.
Oh yeah, Omaha. So that's kind of the story of the Washburn airports, and you know, I had fun doing this. I learned a lot. I did learn a lot about my area, and I'm now even more proud to be a Washburnite. One thing about Earl that I forgot to mention is when he was flying these patients down to Minneapolis, he was having to fly at night and only had a flashlight. And that's all he had to go, and he thought he could watch, during the day he would watch highways. He would guide himself on highways to get down to Minneapolis. But at night he didn't have anything like that. And so he was trying, and there weren't many cars out at night. So he had farmers that he could call ahead of time. And they would light bonfires in the fields. And so he was following the bonfires to go down to Amory. He could get to Amory, and then after that, he kind of knew his way to go, you know. But that's the kind of stuff that he did, you know. So, okay, so Kathy and Tracy are here. If you would like, do you want to have something to add, or? Yeah, they have a display in the back of pictures, some pictures from their mom and their grandparents. This is, this is a poem that I thought I could end with. This was something that my dad really liked, and I have this on a plaque. And I have one bedroom here. Oh, I didn't tell you, I have a, when my father died, he left me a building on the main street of Washburn, a brownstone. And I have an apartment upstairs, and I rent the lower section out to DSGW Architects out of Duluth right now. And I have one bedroom turned into a flying room. And my 3 grandsons come and stay with, and they have a bunk bed, and they've got all this kind of stuff. But this was the poem that my dad liked so much. Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter-silvered wings. Sunward I've climbed and joined the rumbling mirth of sun-split clouds and done 100 things you have not dreamed of. Wheeled and soared and swung high in the sunless islands, hovering there. I've chased the shouting wind along and flung my eager craft through footless halls of air. Up the long, delirious, burning blue. I've topped the windswept heights with easy grace, where never lark or even eagle flew. And while with silent lifting mind, I've trod the high, untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God. This was, Ronald Reagan read this when the Challenger went down. This was his favorite poem too, and a man out of Canada had written this, a young 19-year-old, and he was a young man who died just months before Pearl Harbor, the author of this poem. So I thought that was maybe a good way to end. Thank you all for coming, and
Thank you again, and I'll just remind everybody, there are some things you might want to look at in the back, and our speakers and Earl Johnson's granddaughters will be around a little bit too, that they can share some stories, or maybe you can share some stories with them. And remember, in 2 weeks, it'll be the final